Most people planning Japan are making a big mistake before they even book their flight. They pick their days one of two ways: what time they can get off work and when the cherry blossoms are out. And they both feel like smart choices, right? Obviously. But they can put you right in the middle of the most expensive, most crowded, and most frustrating version of Japan you could probably have. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 4 key windows that can hurt your Japan trip if you're not careful, and what actually happens in Japan during each of those windows, and the other times where Japan actually opens up and gives you the kind of trip you actually came for. There's an ongoing debate about this particular season. Half the travel content out there tells you it's the reason to go to Japan. The other half tells you to avoid it completely. And honestly, they're both right. Let me jump into some of the reasons the anti-cherry blossom crowd says to avoid this season completely. Flights are some of the most expensive of the year. The Japanese school year actually ends in late March, so you've got that domestic family travel on top of international people coming in. And the peak bloom of the cherry blossoms at the famous spots lasts honestly like a week. So even if you book 6 months out and the bloom comes early or late, which let's face it, it does every year, you basically pay top tier peak prices for regular cherry blossom timing. Even if you get it right, you're gonna be shoulder to shoulder at Ueno Park or at the Philosopher's Path in Kyoto with everybody else who planned their trip around this exact same time. So what about the half that says to still go during cherry blossom season? There's 2 ways to make sure you get a dope cherry blossom experience. First, timing. Again, you're going through a cherry blossom season, so it's still gonna be expensive. But if you shoot for a week or 2 before they're predicting that they're gonna bloom, then I think you can get a better deal. So the second practical thing is location. And this is true of Japan in a lot of different ways. And so what I mean by this is there are smaller parks where a lot of local Japanese go that never make lists and will never be as crowded as the more famous spots like Ueno or some of the other, the Philosopher's Path like I mentioned. So actually, there's a park near to where my Japanese family lives. It's about 15 minutes from where they stay, and my memories of this particular park have always been super chill. It's like a few families that are hanging out, the breeze just hopping over the water, just being able to chill and kind of take it all in. I think that's what cherry blossom viewing is actually supposed to be like. On top of that, like a pro tip, I would avoid anywhere they explicitly say, hey, we're having a cherry blossom event. So if they're saying, hey, we're having a cherry blossom festival at X park, you probably just walking yourself into some chaos. So I wouldn't do that, but you grown, I think, so that's up to you. Some people actually say that cherry blossom season is the absolute worst time to go, but I think this next season is actually a lot worse. So if you're looking to go to Japan and you're unsure about what to do or where to get started, be sure to grab my free Japan guide, which will help you have the best possible trip to Japan, and the link's in the description. So if you're planning a trip to Japan, chances are you've heard of this particular week in Japan. For those anime fans out there, it might be when your favorite anime is on break, which probably brings up some painful memories. Golden Week is technically 4 national holidays that's packed into like a week. It's usually around the end of April or into early May, and most people in Japan actually take the whole week off. The thing that I think makes this worse than cherry blossom season is it's not just people from other countries that's coming. You have Japanese people that are traveling all at the same time. So if you want to reserve seat on a bullet train, for example, it actually becomes pretty difficult to do. If there's any kind of delay, you might find yourself stuck in a train station for hours just because the delay with the sheer number of humans that are human in one location, you know what I mean? Or you end up standing like on the bullet train for the entire 3-hour ride, like somebody I know. And the hotels in a lot of the touristy areas book out months in advance and at prices that might not look like what you saw when you initially started planning. If you started planning, make sure you plan. But here's the other thing that catches people off guard. One thing a lot of people say, and I think this is true, and I'll talk about this in another video, is some of the best experiences in Japan generally happen when you get away from some of the main tourist areas, down a back street into a spot where mostly local people eat. But the problem with Golden Week is a lot of the small places, mom and pop shops typically do close. The owners are finally enjoying some vacation, because they work hard. And the other piece of it is a lot of smaller businesses in Japan, and Japan in general has pretty trash websites. I'm sorry, Japan. Y'all know y'all have trash websites. It's just a thing. But especially a small business, their website is probably dog water. And so they don't update their hours online, like if you live somewhere in the West. So you find a spot, you walk up, and then there's a piece of paper on the door, and that's it. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, there's nothing more disappointing than spending time looking up a place or getting excited about it that you think is going to be worth talking about with other people or whatever, and then you find out they closed for the next few days. And If you're there on a trip like this, you may be long gone. So what do you do instead of Golden Week? Late May and the early June, I think, is one of the most underrated times to come to Japan. To be honest, most people are way too focused, in my opinion, on cherry blossoms or catching the fall colors, even though, again, those are great seasons. Once Golden Week ends and you give it maybe like a week, you've got great weather just before the rainy season, prices come down, and you get to start to move around Japan without any of that extra friction or tourist pressure. I know I said Golden Week can be brutal. I think there's one period of time in Japan that if I had to tell you, do not do, this would be the one. So this time period in Japan has started to get a reputation in Japan travel circles. In my personal opinion, it still catches people off guard a little more than Golden Week does. So my cousin and I actually were having this conversation not too long ago. I talk about him a lot in some of my other videos. And so we were going back and forth about what time period do we think is the worst time to be in Japan. And we went through them all. And I think eventually where we landed was Obon. Here is why Obon, I think, is the worst time to come to Japan. So Obon is a Buddhist holiday that happens in the middle of August. And so the majority of families all over Japan travel back to their hometown or their home, the house they grew up in, as a way to honor their ancestors. Obon itself runs from about August 13th to August 16th, but I would say the travel rush starts about a couple days before and doesn't end until maybe like the 17th. You have companies that give more time off. And if you really think about the time of year it is, it's already peak summer travel for most of the West, like the US, Europe, and, UK. You've basically got the entire country traveling domestically at the same time that international travel is at its highest. And so Golden Week is just one wave, right? Like you have some international tourists, you have local travel. But I think Obon is like two waves hitting at one time. I remember when I was in school, it felt like Obon was that last hurrah before everything started back up again. So everybody wanted to do something, go somewhere, and enjoy the rest of their summer. And that energy is everywhere. You feel it from the moment you get to a train station. And so everybody's trying to squeeze the last little bit of juice out of summer. So it has that same sort of practical problem as Golden Week, but I think with a lot more on top of it. What's the move if Obon is unavoidable? What do you do? Well, key thing is booking things in advance where possible, expecting that there's just going to be a lot of people here, getting up early and places that are slightly off away from the main spots. You can still have a great trip, I think, but it takes a lot more planning. If you have any flexibility at all, I think September is one of the most underrated times to go to Japan. Things kind of start to ease down internationally. And even though it doesn't start to get cool until later in September, I think you kind of get this cool shift in Japan. Food changes, you get some fall food that comes in rotation, and that's cool and worth experiencing. So you got festivals that kick off, and I think you're moving around right before the people come to check out the fall colors and all of that. If you have to go during Obon, sorry. I mean, you can do it, but you just get some of the same problems that Golden Week has on steroids. But if there was one I could tell you to avoid, it would be Obon. This next one, I think, is worth considering in general. And the reason I included it is I think a lot of people underestimate it. But before I get into that, if you've ever been to Japan during any of these time periods and you found a way to make it work, definitely drop that in the comments. Some of the best information I get does come from people watching these videos. So definitely share your opinion. Look, y'all, I'm gonna be real. I was born during this time period, so I don't know if there's a weird loyalty. I don't know, it's weird. But this next time in Japan can change the math on your whole trip. The heat and humidity alone in July and August in Japan aren't just uncomfortable. I think they can actually change what you do in a single day. And here's what I mean. You know those people that take a shower and then when they go outside, they sweating again? Fortunately, I'm not one of those people, so sorry to y'all. But the reality is I think you need more breaks. Things can take a lot longer. Without you realizing it, the heat is managing you instead of you managing the heat. By the time you get to the afternoon, you could be a lot more tired than you think, especially with the jet lag and all of that stuff on top of it. Summer can be brutal, especially if you don't prepare for it. In Japan, you constantly see alerts about people who pass away from heat exhaustion. So it's not a game, but yeah, it's hot. So what do you do if summer is actually the only time you can go, like legitimately? I think there's really one big key to enjoying a Japan trip during the summer, other than being in Japan, I guess, is you'll notice that there's certain people that are not sort of brute forcing their way through the heat. They're sort of flowing through. They're hitting places early in the morning. They're taking breaks during the heat of the middle of the day, and they come back out in the evening. And I think that's really where summertime Japan shines. Like fireworks festivals on the late night, getting up early to check out a cool cafe, or getting out in nature before the heat gets to cooking. With experience, you kind of learn to work around the extreme heat and all the people and all the things. And summer, I think, becomes a lot more manageable. Just watch out for that heat stroke, seriously. So now you've got the 4 windows. I'm gonna give you 2 quick ones if you have any flexibility at all, because I think they're worth an honorable mention. Early March, before cherry blossom season peaks, is underrated and more quiet in Japan. So that transition out of February into March, and January or February outside of New Year's, because you get a chance to see a side of Japan that most people don't, and a lot of people who are following that main sort of popular calendar. Again, if the only window you have to go is Golden Week or Obon Go, a trip to Japan is still a trip to Japan, and there's ways to go about it. But I think the thing that can make a Japan trip great and make you look like an expert and have people asking you, how did you make it so easy, is timing. This helps you do that. Now that you know when to go, the next question is, okay, so what do I do when I get there? In this next video, I'm gonna introduce some spots that I think maximize the time you have and tell you which ones you might wanna skip.